Today we're talking about Chapter 4, Level 2, which begins on page 242. It is about if functions. The if function is one of the most powerful things in Excel, and the better you understand it and know how to use it, the more power you'll be able to apply in your spreadsheets. Let's talk about what the if function actually does. Basically, remember we said any function begins with equal sign. Then we have name of function. I'm just doing this in general. Then we open parentheses, and then we have, I'm just going to call them A, B, C. We have one or more things that the function needs to do its job. Okay, so with a it didn't know what A, B, C, and D are. So let's just put an apostrophe in front of this so it will treat it as text. So function begins with equal sign followed by, and I'll put this spreadsheet out there, followed by name of function followed by parentheses. Inside the parentheses are the thing or things the function needs to do its job. If more than one, these items are separated by commas. So that's the definition of a function. That's how all functions work. Equals, name of the thing, got to have parentheses. And we've used this example before. Equals sum, you've got to put one or more things that can be added together. They could be expressions, they could be cell references, could be chunks of cells. And I'm just going to put stuff in there, stuff to add together. And of course, it's not going to like that if I enter now, so I'll put that parenthesis, I'll put that apostrophe there. Let's talk about the if function specifically. The if function starts with the name of the function, and then it has three different parameters or arguments. I'm just going to call them A, B, C. This is the if function in general. If you look on page 244, in the middle of the page it defines what an if function is. And it says the first thing is called a logical test. So if I say equals if and I open the paren, notice the first thing that pops up says the first thing I need is a logical test. What does that mean? That means something I can test and come up with it's either true or it's false. That's my test. Then the second thing, it says if that logical test is true, give me this value. That's the value I want here if that thing is true. If that thing is false, then I want this third thing as the value here. Now, that's the formal definition. I think this is a much easier way to think of it. This says if the first thing is true, give me the second thing. Otherwise, give me the third thing. That's all that means. If the first thing's true, put the second thing here. Otherwise, put the third thing here. A programmer would say it this way. A programmer would say if, well, let's restate this with my ABC. If A is true, give me B. Otherwise, give me C. That's all that means. A programmer would say if A then B, else C. That's how you would write it in most programming languages. So let's do a simple example. Let's put a range of numbers. Let's do 10 and 20, and if we grab both of those and copy it down, it will go by tens, and so I'm going to go from 10 to 80. All right. And let's say we've determined that 50 is a big number. Anything that's 50 or greater is a big number, but anything that's smaller than 50, we'll call that a small number. So I'm going to do a very simple if statement. I'm going to say equals if, open paren, and I'm going to click the thing on the left. If this thing on the left is greater than or equal to 50, comma, that's my logical test. Check to see if that thing is bigger than or equal to 50. If that's true, I want to put the word big right here. So that's a chunk of text, so I have to put it in quotes. What if it's not true, comma, then I want to put the word small. And now when I press enter, it checks that first thing. It says that 10 thing, that's not bigger than or equal to 50, so you wanted me to put the word small there. Now if I click that and double click the fill box, it will fill all the way down, and notice it checks every number to the left, and it says, oh, those things that were at least 50 are big, and the things that were not 50 are small. How's that feel? That's how the if function works. Check the first thing. If it's true, give me the second thing. Otherwise, give me the third thing. So here's our formula that we just wrote. Now, is that the only way we could have done it? No. We could have done it the other way and said, check to see if it's less than 50, and if that's true, call it small. Otherwise, call it big. Right? It's the same. It's going to result in the same thing. So I'm going to write that formula here, and we should get the same result. I'm going to say check and see if that number over there is less than 50. If it's strictly less than 50, then call it small. Otherwise, call it big. Okay, I reversed my condition. Instead of saying greater than or equal to 50, I said less than 50. That's the opposite. And so now, what used to be true is now false, and what used to be false is now true. So I want small if this thing's true. So this should still tell me small, and when I copy it down, I get the same result. Okay, so there's no one right way to do something. There's only more efficient ways to do it and less efficient ways to do it. But as long as it's correct and it gets the job done, that's fine. Now, if I had known I was going to write both these formulas, I should have said always go to column A, but change the row. Because then I could move it over here and it would still go to column A. Okay. The reason that's important is that if you have a spreadsheet and you end up inserting some columns, then your formulas still work because as you move them over, they're still going back and checking in column A. That's how an if function works. Oh, by the way, on page 248, they have a best practice in the middle of the page, and they say, sometimes users are tempted to include an if function in a formula even when it's not required. If you're only comparing two values and you just want to know if it's true or false, then you don't need an if function, and that's what we did in section level 1, wasn't it? We just said, is this thing greater than 4? You just say equals this thing greater than 4, and it'll tell you true or false. You don't have to say if this thing greater than 4, comma, true, comma, false. You don't have to use an if it's just two things. But this was more than two things, wasn't it? Or we didn't just want a true or false, we wanted it to say small or big. If we wanted this just to be true or false, I could have said, if this thing greater than 50, greater than or equal to 50, let's say we wanted to say true if it's big. Then I could say, is it big? And I don't need an if statement, do I? I can just say, check to see if that thing's greater than or equal to 50. If all I were interested is say true or false, is it big, then we could do that. But if I actually want it to do something other than true or false, then I have to use the if statement. Let me show the formulas there. Here's an if statement that says big or small. Here's the reverse of it that says small or big. And then here's one that just shows true or false, is it big? And you don't have to use an if statement. An if statement can only choose one of two paths. What if we need to choose one of more than two paths? What if we want to say some numbers are big, some are medium, and some are small? Then we'd have to have a nested if statement. All right? Yes. Nested, you know the Russian dolls that are nested? You've got a little doll and it's inside a bigger one and it's inside a bigger one. That's what we mean by nesting. So we have an if function inside of an if function inside of an if function, that sort of thing. Now, once it gets past 2 or 3 if functions, there are usually easier ways to do it. But we want to illustrate the if function. Let's do a similar thing to what we did before, only now we want 3 choices. So here's the idea. This is what we call mutually exclusive choices. On page 254, at the bottom of the page, there's a green bar that says the order of logical tests for mutually exclusive criteria. In other words, in our situation, can a number be big and small and medium or intermediate at the same time? I mean, if we... No. So, in other words, if there's only one choice that each thing can be, then it doesn't matter what order you put them in. But if it could match several of them, then it does matter, because the first thing that it matches, that's what you'll get. And we'll show that in a minute. So let's do this. Let's say that if it's 30, let's make a little chart here. We're going to say small is less than 30. Okay. We're going to say medium is between 30 and 60, and it includes both of those. And we're going to say big is greater than 60. This is our table so that we know what our definition is of big and small and medium. As we said before, each one of these numbers is only going to fall into one of those ranges, isn't it? Because the ranges don't overlap. Is 30 medium or small based on this definition? Medium includes 30, but small is less than 30, right? So 30 is medium, isn't it? Is 60 medium or big? We have to be greater than 60 to be big. Okay? Now, see, if I had less than or equal to here, now we've got a problem. Because 30 is defined both as small and as medium. We don't want that. We have to make sure that our ranges don't overlap. So if I wanted 30 to be small, then I'd have to say it's got to be greater than 30 and less than 60 if I wanted 60 to be big. Okay, so you have to be careful as far as, are we talking strictly less than? Does it include that or does it not include that? Does that make sense? Okay, so 30 is medium, 60 is medium. Anything between here is medium. Less than 30 is small, bigger than 60 is big. Yes, if all we wanted to do is say, is this thing between 30 and 60? Then we could just say, this thing has to be greater than or equal to 30, and at the same time, this thing has to be less than or equal to 60. This would be the way to say, is this thing medium? We don't even need an if statement. It has to be greater than or equal to this, and it also has to be less than or equal to that. That's how we do a range. If we're just do the and function, yes. If it's in a range, if it has to be bigger than this and smaller than that, it's got to satisfy both of them. Does that make sense? So let me move this over and put a heading on there. So this says, is it medium? Is it medium? It's got to be bigger than or equal to 30, and at the same time, it's got to be less than or equal to 60. 200 is bigger than or equal to 30, but it's not medium because it's not less than or equal to 60. So if I copy that down, it should be correct and show us true only if it's medium. It's not copying down with the double click because there's nothing in the left column. I have to drag it down. So notice it says true only on these that are between 30 and 60, including the endpoints. That's how we can ask if something's between a range without even using an if statement. But in this case, we're not doing that. We're saying, tell me if it's small, medium, or big. I'm saying the thing that I'm checking for, if I want it between 30 and 60, and I include 30 and 60, then I want to say make it bigger than or equal to 30, and at the same time make it less than or equal to the upper part. And so that would be an and function. If I put an or function here, everything's going to be true. Pick any number, it's either going to be bigger than 30 or it's going to be less than 60. Every number is going to be true because it'll satisfy one of those. Okay, so that's a way to say, is it medium? Now let's do a nested if statement to answer our original question. I'm going to put here big, medium, or small. We're going to do our nested if statement here. There are several ways to do it. Typically, we start at one end. We start at the high end and work down, or we start at the low end and work up. Let's do it both ways. Let's start at the low end and work up. I'm going to say, if this thing to the left, if that thing is less than 30, then what do I want it to say here? We'd want it to say small, wouldn't we? So I say, if it's less than 30, call it small. But if it's not less than 30, I can't call it medium because what if it's 200? I have to put another if statement here to check something else. If it's less than 30, I can call it small because that's at one end. But now, if I get to this point and it's not small, I already know it's at least 30, don't I? Or else I would have gotten small. So I can say, now what do I want to check? If what? If it's not less than 30, then check and see if it's greater than 60. Actually, if I'm working from top to bottom, I'd say check and see if it's less than or equal to 60. Okay, so now I'll say, is this thing less than or equal to 60? If that's true, I already know it's at least 30, so I would call it medium, wouldn't I? If that's not true, we know it's bigger than 60, so we can call it big. I put a closed parenthesis here that closes this if statement, but I haven't closed this one yet, so I need another closed paren. And Excel is very nice because it matches up our parentheses with the same color. So red is the inside if statement and black is the outside. Okay? So this should work. It says check and see if it's less than 30. If it is, give me small. If it's not, then check something else. Check and see if it's less than or equal to 60. We already know it's not smaller than 30. So if it's less than or equal to 60, we already know it's at least 30. Call it medium. Otherwise, now we know it's bigger than 60. Call it big. So that should be correct. And if I copy that down, it says here's our small numbers, here's our medium numbers, here's our big numbers. Now, is that the only way to do it? No. We could have started at the top and worked down. Let's do that one time and then we'll go do the steps of success, okay? Let me insert a column here. Okay, here we actually checked small first, didn't we? So I'm going to call this S, M, or B because we did it in order from bottom to top. Small, medium, or big. That's what we did there, didn't we? Now let's do it from the other end. Now we're going to check first to see if it's big. So equals if this thing, how do I check to see if it's big? So I say, is this thing greater than 60? If it is, can I say what it is right now? So if this is true, just call it big, okay? But if that's not true, that means it's 60 or less, so I got to check something else. If it's bigger than 60, call it big. But if it's not, now I got to do another if statement. See, we want to go from top to bottom now. Yeah, how could I check to see if it's medium now? I know it's not bigger than 60. How about if I check to see if it's bigger than or equal to 30? That would mean it's medium because it's not bigger than 60. We know it's not big. So we just have to, we said here's the bottom shelf for big. Now let's check the bottom shelf for medium. Okay, so I'm going to say if that thing's bigger than 60, we know it's big. Otherwise, check something else. Check to see if that thing is greater than or equal to 30. Now we know if that's true, then it's between 30 and 60. Because we already said it's not bigger than 60. Okay? We're in the false part of that first if statement. So if it's greater than or equal to 30, call it medium. And if it's not greater than or equal to 30, we already know it's not bigger than 60. Now it's small, isn't it? If you only need to choose between two things, you have one if statement because it can choose between two things. If you need three things, then you're going to need two if statements. Four things, you'll need three if statements. Okay? You need one less if statement than how many things you have to check. It says, do you want to accept this correction? Everybody see what I messed up with? I forgot the double close parenthesis. It says, I think that's what you need. And I say, yep, that's what I need. So it puts it there, and we should get the same result. We said it a different way, but it still gives the same result. Let's show those formulas. Here we started at the bottom, said, tell me if it's small. If it's not, then check for medium, and if it's not, then check for big. Actually, you don't even have to check for big. If it's not small and it's not medium, it's got to be big. Here we started at the other end. We said check to see if it's big. If it's not big, then check to see if it's medium. If it's not either of those, then it's got to be small. So that's how a nested if statement works.